My name is Reynaldo, 32 years old, and I learned the hard way that success can be invisible to those who expect you to fail. Standing outside the Monarch, the most exclusive hotel in Boston, I watched my mother and sister laugh at my dinner reservation for Dad. They had no idea I owned not just the reservation, but the entire building. The security chief approached, recognition in his eyes. Before I tell you how this family dinner changed everything, drop a comment where you are watching from and subscribe if you want more stories about family blindness. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in western Massachusetts, the kind where everyone knows your business and expectations are as limited as the local career options. My parents worked steady jobs that kept us fed and clothed, but luxuries were few and far between. My father drove trucks for a regional distribution company, while my mother worked as an administrative assistant at the local high school. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy. From my earliest memories, I was always living in the shadow of my older sister, Miranda. 4 years my senior, she excelled at everything she touched. Honor roll student, debate team captain, scholarship recipient. Her academic achievements papered the walls of our family home, while my average grades and creative interests were treated as disappointments. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. A question my mother asked so frequently, it might as well have been our family motto. Miranda was destined for greatness, according to my mother. I was the son who needed to temper his expectations, but my father saw something different in me. While he never directly contradicted my mother, he would find quiet moments to encourage my dreams. Late nights when he returned from long hauls, he would sit with me at the kitchen table and ask about my ideas. He listened in a way my mother never did. "You've got something special, Ray," he would tell me, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. "You see opportunities where others see problems. That's rare." My father understood my fascination with hotels from the beginning. During his trucking routes, he would occasionally stay at small roadside motels and bring back the little soaps and shampoo bottles for me. I collected them in a shoebox under my bed. Treasures from a world I was determined to join someday. "Hotels are magical places," I told my father once when I was 12. "They're like little worlds where everyone is taken care of." He nodded, understanding completely. "And someday, you'll run one of those worlds." My mother overheard this conversation and scoffed. "Hotels are for people who clean toilets, or rich people who own them. You're not going to be rich. So, guess which one you'll be doing?" That dismissal stung, but it was just one of countless similar moments. My sister would smirk from behind her textbooks, silently reinforcing the family hierarchy. As we grew older, the pattern continued. Miranda graduated high school with honors and went to an impressive university on scholarship. I struggled more academically, not because I lacked intelligence, but because traditional education never captured my interest the way real-world business did. I still remember my high school graduation dinner. My mother invited extended family and neighbors to celebrate Miranda's acceptance to graduate school, casually mentioning my graduation as an afterthought. "And Reynaldo finished high school too," she announced, her tone suggesting this was an unexpected achievement. Despite everything, my father remained my quiet champion. On the night before I left for college, he slipped into my room and handed me an envelope. "It's not much," he said, "but it's something to help you get started." Inside was $500 he had saved from his personal spending money, along with a note that read, "Build your own world, Ray. I believe in you." That money became my first investment in my future, though not in the way either of us expected at the time. The irony is that while my mother and sister were convinced I would never amount to much, they were the ones who couldn't see the possibilities that lay ahead. Their blindness to my potential would eventually cost them dearly in ways they couldn't imagine. As my father's 60th birthday approached, I found myself reflecting on his unwavering support throughout my life. Despite my mother's constant criticism and my sister's condescension, he had never stopped believing in me. I wanted to do something spectacular to show him that his faith hadn't been misplaced, something that would finally force my mother and sister to see me clearly. Little did they know that the dream I'd shared with my father all those years ago hadn't just come true. It had exceeded both our wildest expectations. My journey into the hospitality industry began with more stumbles than strides. After high school, I enrolled in a state college with a hospitality management program. It wasn't prestigious, but it was affordable with student loans and part-time work. Meanwhile, Miranda was thriving at her elite university, collecting internships at Fortune 500 companies, and making connections that my mother assured everyone would guarantee her success. 2 years into my program, financial reality hit hard. My student loans were mounting. My grades were decent but not scholarship-worthy, and I was spending more time working at a local hotel than focusing on coursework. The practical experience felt more valuable than the theoretical lessons anyway. The decision to drop out wasn't easy, but it was pragmatic. I could continue accumulating debt for a degree that employers might not value, or I could fully commit to learning the business from the inside. I chose the latter, accepting a full-time position at the Harborview Inn, a small 3-star property where I'd been working weekends. When I told my family about my decision over Sunday dinner, you would have thought I had announced a plan to join a cult. College dropout, my mother said, shaking her head as though I'd confirmed her lowest expectations. What respectable hotel will hire you for management without a degree? Miranda, fresh from a summer internship at a consulting firm, didn't even try to hide her superiority. Hospitality is a service industry, Ray. You're basically choosing to be a servant. Only my father offered any support, though even he seemed concerned. Are you sure about this, son? It's a tough road without credentials. I'm sure, Dad, I told him. I learn more in one shift than I do in a week of classes. That same evening, Miranda announced she'd been offered an analyst position at her internship company upon graduation. My mother practically burst with pride, serving Miranda an extra-large piece of dessert while my announcement was forgotten. The next 5 years were a lesson in humility and hustle. I started at the front desk of the Harborview working overnight shifts, the least desirable schedule that new employees typically received. But while others complained, I saw it as an opportunity. The quiet hours between midnight and dawn gave me time to study every aspect of hotel operations. I read manuals, examined financial statements that managers had left out, and even taught myself basic accounting and revenue management from books I bought online. My breakthrough came during my 3rd year at the Harborview. A guest checking in at 3 a.m. turned out to be Jackson Merritt, a seasoned hotel investor looking at properties in our area. Unable to sleep, he came down to the lobby where I was working alone. We started talking, and I shared some ideas I had for improving the struggling property. You understand this business better than most GMs I've met, he told me, surprised to find such insight from a night clerk. Have you ever thought about the ownership side? That conversation changed everything. Jackson became my mentor, teaching me about hotel, finance, property valuation, and the art of the deal. He showed me how to leverage other people's money to acquire assets, a concept that seemed like financial wizardry to someone who grew up thinking wealth was something you were born into, not something you created. All this time, my family remained unaware of my developing expertise and connections. At gatherings, my mother would still introduce Miranda as our successful daughter and me as our son, who works at a hotel. The distinction was clear. One child was ascending, the other merely existing. When Miranda got married at 28 to a corporate attorney she met at work, the wedding was an extravagant affair that my parents contributed to significantly, stretching their modest savings. At the reception, I was seated with distant cousins far from the family table. When guests asked what I did, my mother would swoop in to answer before I could. He's still finding his way, she would say with a practiced smile that conveyed both apology and lowered expectations. What nobody knew was that by this point, Jackson and I had formed a partnership and purchased our first property, a struggling 30-room motel outside Springfield that we acquired for a bargain price. We renovated it on a shoestring budget, instituted new management practices I had developed, and turned it profitable within 10 months. My initial investment came from that $500 my father had given me, now grown through careful saving and strategic stock investments Jackson had guided me toward. The success of that first property led to a second, slightly larger acquisition. Then, a third. Each was structured under an LLC that kept my name off public records, with Jackson as the public face of our growing portfolio. This wasn't from shame, but strategy. I had learned that anonymity had advantages in business negotiations. 2 years into our partnership, my father had a heart attack. It wasn't severe, but it was a warning sign that shook me deeply. Sitting beside his hospital bed while my mother and sister spoke with doctors, I realized how quickly time was passing. My father was getting older, and he still didn't know about my success. I had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal everything, but perfect moments rarely arrive on their own. Sometimes you have to create them. When I get out of here, I'm going to retire, my father told me quietly. Life's too short to spend it on the road. Can you afford to? I asked, knowing my parents' financial situation was stable, but not abundant. He sighed. We'll make it work. Your mother won't be happy about downsizing, but it's time. That conversation cemented my resolve. I would create a moment to reveal the truth, and it would coincide with giving my father the retirement he deserved. The timing aligned perfectly with his upcoming 60th birthday, still 6 months away. By then, I would be ready to show my family exactly who I had become while they weren't looking. With my father's health scare as motivation, I accelerated my business plans. Jackson and I had been discussing a more ambitious project, and now was the time to move forward. We identified a distressed luxury property in downtown Boston, a historic hotel called the Bradford that had fallen into disrepair and financial trouble under mismanagement. The purchase price was steep at $28 million, but Jackson helped arrange financing based on our proven track record of turnarounds. I took a significant personal risk, leveraging everything I had built so far for my share of the investment. If this failed, I would lose everything. If it succeeded, it would catapult our portfolio into an entirely different league. During the 18 months of acquisition, renovation, and rebranding, I maintained my modest lifestyle. I still lived in a reasonable apartment, drove a practical car, and whenever family asked about my work, I kept details vague. Let them think I was still just a hotel employee. The reveal would be worth the continued misconception. The Bradford was transformed into the Monarch, a name I chose specifically for its symbolism of transformation and beauty, emerging from a humble chrysalis. We preserved the historic architecture while modernizing the interior, creating a blend of classic elegance and contemporary luxury that quickly attracted attention in hospitality circles. 6 months after opening, the Monarch was already exceeding revenue projections and gaining recognition as one of Boston's premier luxury hotels. Celebrities, business leaders, and political figures began choosing us for their stays. We earned our first industry award, with my name as managing director listed in small print that my family never saw. Meanwhile, Miranda's career continued its predictable upward trajectory. She received a promotion to senior vice president at her corporation, a fact my mother mentioned in every phone call and family gathering. Miranda bought a large house in an exclusive suburb, drove a luxury car, and took Instagram-worthy vacations that my mother proudly shared with her friends. What my sister didn't share was the 80-hour work weeks, the constant stress, or the growing distance between her and her husband. Success has many facades, and Miranda was careful to only show the glossy exterior to the family. During a holiday gathering at Miranda's home, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "When are you going to get serious about your future, Reynaldo? You're 31 now. Miranda was already a director by your age." I smiled and shrugged. "I'm doing all right, Mom. "All right isn't successful," she replied. "You could at least try to get into management at that hotel. Or better yet, apply to some of the companies Miranda has connections with. She could help you if you'd just ask." The irony of her suggestion was almost painful. My sister helped me get a corporate job when I was currently employing over 200 people, but I held my tongue. The timing wasn't right yet. That summer, Miranda and her husband planned a family vacation to Cape Cod, renting a large beach house for 2 weeks. They invited my parents, some cousins, and pointedly did not invite me. "It's just that the house is already at capacity," Miranda explained when my father asked why I wasn't included. "And honestly, Ray, it's pretty expensive. We didn't think you could afford to chip in." My father looked uncomfortable but didn't press the issue. Later, he called me privately to apologize. "It's not right," he said. "Family should include everyone." "Don't worry about it, Dad," I assured him. "I've got plans anyway." Those plans included finalizing the purchase of our most ambitious acquisition yet, a landmark property in Newport, Rhode Island. But they didn't need to know that. As my father's birthday approached, I began planning the perfect revelation. The monarch would be the stage, and his 60th birthday celebration would be the occasion. I reserved our most prestigious private dining room, instructed the executive chef to create a special menu featuring all of my father's favorite foods, and arranged for a custom cake shaped like his first delivery truck. I sent formal invitations to the entire family, including extended relatives my mother had always tried to impress. The cardstock was heavy and embossed with the monarch's elegant logo, with no indication that I was anything more than a son hosting his father's birthday. The responses came quickly, with everyone accepting. Only my mother called with concerns. "And, Reynaldo, this place you've chosen," she began, her tone already disapproving. "Do you understand how expensive it is? Your father looked it up online, and the private dining rooms start at $5,000, not including food." "I've got it covered, Mom," I said calmly. "How? Are you going into debt for this?" "Because that would be incredibly irresponsible." "No debt, I promise," she sighed heavily. "I just don't want you embarrassing yourself or the family by booking something you can't afford. There are plenty of nice restaurants that would be more appropriate for your budget. Trust me, Mom. Everything is taken care of." I could practically hear her shaking her head through the phone. "If you say so. But don't come asking us for money when the bill comes." The next day, Miranda called. "Mom told me about this ridiculous venue you've booked for Dad's birthday. Are you trying to show off or something?" "I just want to do something special for Dad," I replied. "Well, I've put together a list of alternatives that are more in your price range," she continued. "Places that are still nice, but won't require you to eat ramen for the next year to pay off." "I appreciate the thought, but the reservation is confirmed." "Fine," she huffed. "But when they ask for a credit card to hold the table, and you can't produce one with a high enough limit, don't say I didn't try to help." Only my father seemed genuinely pleased about the venue. He called me separately, his voice warm with excitement. "The Monarch, huh? I've driven past it many times, but never imagined going inside. It looks like something from another world." "You deserve the best, Dad," I told him, meaning every word. "I don't need fancy, son. Just having everyone together would be enough." "Well, we're going to have both. And trust me, it'll be a birthday you'll never forget." As the day approached, I made sure every detail was perfect. The staff was briefed about the special nature of the event. Security was informed about potential family drama, and I arranged for a photographer to capture the inevitable expressions when the truth was revealed. The stage was set for a family revelation that would change everything. The only question that remained was how my mother and sister would react when their carefully constructed hierarchy came crumbling down. The day of my father's birthday dinner arrived with picture-perfect weather. I went to the Monarch early, ostensibly to check on the reservation, but actually to oversee the final preparations personally. The private dining room looked spectacular, with arrangements of my father's favorite blue hydrangeas tables set with our finest china and crystal, and a spectacular view of the Boston skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The executive chef reviewed the customized menu with me one last time. "Everything is prepared to your specifications, Mr. Reynaldo. We've sourced the exact bourbon your father prefers for the glazed salmon, and the birthday cake is being finished as we speak." I thanked him and moved to the security office, where I could monitor the arrivals on the discrete cameras installed throughout the hotel's public areas. I had asked everyone to arrive 30 minutes before my father to ensure the surprise would be perfect. My plan was to greet guests in the lobby, then escort them upstairs to the private dining room. At precisely 5:30, the first car pulled up to the valet stand. It was Miranda and her husband Robert, arriving in their sleek black Mercedes. I watched as they handed over their keys with the casual entitlement of people accustomed to luxury service. Miranda was dressed impeccably, in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her hair and makeup flawless as always. Shortly after, my mother arrived in the car my father had bought her for their last anniversary. She emerged, looking nervous, but trying to project confidence, smoothing her department store dress as she glanced up at the hotel's grand facade. Miranda spotted her and waved her over. I turned up the volume on the security feed to hear their conversation. "Can you believe Reynaldo chose this place?" Miranda said by way of greeting. "It's completely absurd." My mother nodded, looking around anxiously. "I'm worried about when the bill comes. Do you think we should be prepared to help him?" Miranda laughed. "I brought my credit card just in case. Can you imagine the look on the server's face when he can't pay? So embarrassing." I tried to talk him out of it. My mother sighed. "But you know how stubborn he can be. Always trying to prove something." More family members began to arrive, my aunts and uncles and cousins gathering in small clusters in the lobby. I noticed my mother and Miranda appointing themselves as unofficial greeters, directing people where to wait, as if they were the hosts rather than me. I sent a text message to my mother. "Running a few minutes late. Please ask everyone to wait outside. Dad will be arriving soon, and I don't want him to see anyone until we're all together." This was a strategic move. I wanted everyone outside when I arrived, creating the perfect setting for what was about to unfold. Through the cameras, I watched as my mother herded the family outside to the front entrance area. Miranda took charge, of course organizing people, and continuing to make comments I couldn't hear but could easily imagine. At 6:15, my father's car pulled up. I had arranged for a luxury town car to bring him from home. Another surprise he wasn't expecting. The driver helped him out, and I could see the pleased confusion on his face as he approached the gathering of family members. It was time. I took the private elevator down to the main floor, then exited through a side door that would allow me to approach the hotel entrance as if I had just arrived. I straightened my custom-tailored suit, took a deep breath, and walked around the corner. My family was clustered near the entrance, with my father at the center receiving birthday wishes. Miranda and my mother stood slightly apart, heads together in conversation. They hadn't noticed me yet. As I approached, I heard Miranda's voice clearly. "I can't believe he's not even here on time." So typical. "Maybe he's inside already," my mother suggested. "Or maybe he realized he couldn't afford this after all, and is too embarrassed to show up." Miranda laughed. I was about 15 feet away when they finally spotted me. My mother's expression shifted from annoyance to something approaching pity. "There you are," she called out. "We were getting worried." I smiled and continued walking toward them. As I reached the entrance area, Miranda physically stepped in front of me, creating a barrier between me and the door. "Before we go in," she said in a lowered voice that nonetheless carried to nearby family members, "I just want to make sure you understand what you're getting into. This isn't like the chain restaurants you usually go to." "I'm aware of what the Monarch is," I replied calmly. My mother moved beside Miranda, creating a united front. "Honey, we're just concerned. Your sister looked online, and the private rooms here start at $5,000 for just the space, not including food and drinks for 20 people. Several relatives were now watching this exchange with uncomfortable expressions. My father started to move toward us, his brow furrowed in confusion. Maybe we should just go somewhere else, my mother suggested, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. There's a very nice Italian restaurant just down the street that would be more appropriate. We're not changing venues, Mom, I said firmly. Miranda's laugh was sharp and dismissive. And how exactly are you planning to pay for this? Did you max out your credit cards? Or are you expecting Dad to cover it on his own birthday? My father had reached us now. What's going on? He asked, looking between us with concern. Before I could answer, my mother placed a hand on his arm. We're just discussing some logistics, dear. Reynaldo may have been a bit ambitious with his choice of venue. I don't care where we eat, my father said loyally. Having everyone together is what matters. I looked at him, this man who had always believed in me when no one else did, and felt a surge of emotion. The reservation stands, Dad. Trust me. Miranda made a scoffing sound. This is ridiculous. You're going to embarrass all of us when they ask for payment. I was about to respond when I noticed movement from the hotel entrance. Thomas Reeves, my head of security, was approaching with 2 other staff members. His face was professionally neutral, but I caught the slight twitch of his lips that indicated he was enjoying this moment as much as I was. Excuse me, he said, addressing me directly, while ignoring everyone else. Mr. Reynaldo, the staff has been waiting for your arrival. Your guest's table is prepared according to your specifications. The sudden silence was deafening. Miranda's mouth actually fell open, while my mother froze in confusion. Thank you, Thomas, I replied. I appreciate your patience. We're ready to go in now. Thomas nodded and spoke into his discreet radio. Mr. Reynaldo is arriving with his guests. As if choreographed, the grand doors of the Monarch swung open, revealing a line of staff standing at attention in the lobby. At the center was Gregory Mills, the general manager I had personally hired. Mr. Reynaldo, he called out warmly. Welcome back, sir. Everything is prepared for your father's celebration. I turned to look at my family. The expressions ranged from confusion to shock to dawning realization. My father's face, though, showed something else entirely, pride, mixed with a knowing smile that suggested perhaps he had suspected more than he had ever let on. Shall we? I asked, gesturing toward the open doors. Miranda hadn't moved, her body still blocking the path, though now it seemed less intentional and more from shock. Back? What does he mean? Back. I looked her directly in the eyes. He means welcome back to my hotel. Miranda. Now, are you coming inside? Or would you prefer to remain out here on the sidewalk? The lobby of the Monarch fell silent as our family group entered. The stunning marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and elegant furnishings created a backdrop of luxury that amplified the dramatic tension of the moment. Staff members stood at attention, their eyes following me with a respect that didn't go unnoticed by my speechless relatives. Good evening, Mr. Reynaldo, the front desk manager called out. The Wellington room is ready for your father's celebration. Thank you, Claire, I replied warmly. Please make sure the kitchen knows we're ready to begin at 7. My mother clutched my father's arm, her knuckles white as she looked around in confusion. Miranda trailed behind, uncharacteristically silent. Her husband, Robert, whispering questions in her ear that she couldn't answer. I led the group toward the private elevator that would take us to the Wellington room on the top floor. As we walked, Gregory fell into step beside me. The chef has prepared everything according to your specifications, he informed me. And Mr. Merritt called to confirm he'll be joining for dessert as discussed. Perfect. Thank you, Gregory. From my earliest memories, I was always living in the shadow of my older sister, Miranda. 4 years my senior. She excelled at everything she touched. Honor roll student, debate team captain, scholarship recipient. Her academic achievements papered the walls of our family home, while my average grades and creative interests were treated as disappointments. Before we go up, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Monarch. I hope you'll enjoy your evening here. I paused, looking directly at my mother and sister. As the owner, the collective gasp was audible. Aunt Patricia actually brought a hand to her mouth in shock. Uncle William began coughing uncomfortably. My father's smile grew wider, while my mother looked as though she might faint. Miranda recovered first. Owner? That's impossible. This hotel is worth. It would cost millions, 42 million to be exact, I clarified. After renovations, as we reached the elevator, I turned to address my family. This was the moment I had been planning for months. Yet now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. I gestured to Gregory. Is it a prank, Mr. Mills? Gregory smiled professionally. No, ma'am. Mr. Reynaldo is indeed the majority owner of the Monarch, as well as 7 other properties in our portfolio. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, its doors opening to reveal a luxurious interior with wood paneling and brass fixtures. Shall we continue this conversation upstairs? I believe we have much to discuss over dinner. As we ascended to the top floor, the silence was thick with unspoken questions. My father caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod that conveyed volumes. He wasn't surprised. Not completely. Perhaps he had always known I was capable of this level of success, even when no one else believed it possible. The Wellington room took everyone's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston at twilight, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. The long table was set with fine china, crystal, and silver, with arrangements of blue hydrangeas, creating an elegant but personal touch. A separate table held framed photographs of my father throughout his life, including several of him with me as a child. This is incredible, my father said softly, taking in the scene. As everyone found their place cards and settled into the buttery leather chairs, I remained standing at the head of the table. Now was the time for the full explanation. I'm sure you all have questions, I began. Let me tell you a story about the past 10 years of my life that you haven't heard. I detailed my journey from night clerk to hotel owner, explaining Jackson Merritt's mentorship and our partnership. I described our first small property purchase, then the second and third, building to the Monarch's acquisition and transformation. Throughout my explanation, I kept my tone matter-of-fact, not boastful or vindictive. My mother sat rigid in her chair, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been shame. Miranda stared at her water glass, unable to meet my eyes. All this time, my father said when I finished, "You were building an empire, and none of us knew." I wanted to prove something to myself before revealing it to everyone else, I explained. And I wanted the moment to be special. Particularly for you, Dad. You always believed in me, even when it wasn't the popular position in our family. My mother finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I always knew you would be successful, Reynaldo. I just wanted you to be practical about your approach. It was such a transparent attempt to rewrite history that several relatives exchanged glances. I chose not to contradict her directly. Well, Mom, it appears my approach worked out just fine. Miranda attempted to regain her footing. I always told people my brother worked in hospitality. I was so proud of your dedication. Her husband Robert actually rolled his eyes at this, revealing cracks in their united front I hadn't noticed before. That's not exactly how you phrased it at our wedding, he said quietly. I believe your exact words to my parents were that your brother worked at a hotel, just not in management. Miranda shot him a look that could have frozen fire. The servers began bringing in the first course, a selection of my father's favorite appetizers. As the food arrived, the tension eased slightly, giving everyone a necessary distraction. I've been planning a special surprise for you, Dad, I said, turning the focus where it belonged. On the birthday honoree, Jackson and I are developing a new boutique hotel in Providence, and we're naming it The William, after you. My father's eyes glistened with emotion. You don't have to do that, son. I want to. Your belief in me made all of this possible. My mother attempted to insert herself into the moment. I always encouraged your interest in hotels too, Reynaldo. Remember how I would take you to the Holiday Inn for breakfast sometimes? Several relatives coughed uncomfortably at this obvious revision of history. What I remember, I replied evenly, is you telling me that hotels were for people who clean toilets or rich people who owned them, and I wasn't going to be rich. The table fell silent again. My mother's face flushed red. Well, I was clearly wrong about that, she said with a tight smile. Mothers aren't perfect. We just want what's best for our children. As dinner progressed through multiple courses, each featuring dishes my father loved, the family dynamic began a subtle shift. Relatives who had always deferred to my mother and sister in family discussions now directed their questions to me. Cousins, who had barely spoken to me at gatherings, were suddenly interested in my business insights. Miranda grew increasingly quiet, pushing food around her plate more than eating it. Her husband seemed to be enjoying her discomfort, perhaps revealing problems in their marriage that hadn't been visible before. When the dessert course arrived, so did Jackson Merritt. My business partner and mentor entered the room with his characteristic calm confidence, shaking my father's hand warmly. It's an honor to finally meet you, sir, Jackson told him. Your son is the most naturally gifted hospitality entrepreneur I've ever encountered. I always knew he had something special, my father replied. I just didn't know it would lead to all this. As the custom birthday cake was presented, my father stood to address the room. His voice was steady, but full of emotion. I've lived 60 years now, and I can honestly say I've never been more proud than I am tonight. Not just because of what you've accomplished, Reynaldo, but because of how you did it. You worked hard, stayed humble, and proved yourself without seeking validation. That shows true character. He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on my mother and sister. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down. We should recognize potential in all its forms, not just the ones we personally understand or value. The cake was served as my father opened his gifts. Mine came last, a small envelope placed beside his coffee cup. Inside was the deed to a luxury condominium in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, fully paid for, along with documents outlining a generous retirement package that would allow both my parents to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. You can't possibly afford this, my mother whispered, looking at the papers. I think we've established that I can afford quite a lot, Mom, I replied quietly. As the evening drew to a close, the family dynamics had been irrevocably altered. The hierarchy that had stood unchallenged for decades had crumbled in a single evening, leaving everyone to navigate a new reality where I was no longer the family underachiever. My father's eyes met mine across the table, and in that moment, we both knew that tonight was just the beginning of a profound transformation in our family. The days following my father's birthday dinner brought a tsunami of reactions from family members. My phone buzzed constantly, with messages ranging from congratulatory to apologetic to opportunistic. My mother called first thing the next morning, her voice artificially bright. Reynaldo, darling, what a wonderful surprise last night. I always told your father you would do well if you applied yourself. I let the revisionist history pass without comment. I'm glad you enjoyed the evening, Mom. Dad seemed happy. He certainly was. Now, I was thinking we should have lunch soon. Just the two of us. There are some family investment opportunities I'd like to discuss. And there it was, the pivot from dismissal to attempted exploitation. I'm pretty busy with the Newport property acquisition this week. Maybe next month. She paused, clearly unused to being deprioritized. Well, I suppose your father and I should start looking at that condominium. Will you be available to help us with that at least? My assistant will contact you to arrange everything. The place comes fully furnished, but feel free to make any changes you'd like. It's yours. Another pause. That's very generous, Reynaldo. I always knew you had a good heart. After hanging up, I drove to my father's house. He had asked me to come by, saying he wanted to talk privately. I found him in the garage, organizing his tools, a hobby that had always brought him peace. "There you are," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Come on in." We settled in his small workshop at the back of the garage, sitting on stools surrounded by the projects he'd tinkered with over the years. "So," he began, "a hotel empire." I smiled. "Not quite an empire yet, but we're getting there." "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Ray?" It was a fair question, one I had anticipated. Partly because I wanted to be absolutely certain of my success before announcing it. But honestly, I also wanted the revelation to be dramatic enough that Mom and Miranda couldn't diminish it. He nodded slowly. "I understand that. They've never been fair to you. Did you suspect anything?" I asked. A small smile crossed his face. I had my suspicions. About 3 years ago, I saw a business magazine at my doctor's office with a small picture of you in the background of a hospitality conference. You were standing next to that fellow Jackson, and the caption listed you as a rising hotel investor. I almost said something, but then I figured you had your reasons for keeping quiet. I shook my head, amazed. "And you never mentioned it?" "It wasn't my secret to tell. I figured you'd share when you were ready." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Your mother has been calling her friends all morning," he eventually said. "Suddenly her son is a successful entrepreneur she always believed in." I couldn't help laughing. That was fast. "She's adaptable, your mother. Always has been. She's already talking about hosting charity events at your hotel." "Is that so?" He gave me a knowing look. "You don't have to let her, you know. You're allowed to set boundaries." That simple permission, from the parent who had always been the peacekeeper, meant more than he could know. Over the next few weeks, the family recalibration continued. Miranda called 5 times before I returned her call. When I finally did, she launched immediately into business talk. "I've been thinking about your hotel portfolio," she said without preamble. "Have you considered expanding internationally? Because my company has connections in Asian markets that could be valuable to you. We're focusing on domestic properties at the moment," I replied. "But thanks for the offer. Well, when you're ready to think bigger, let me know. I could probably arrange introductions to some key players for a standard consulting fee." Of course, I nearly laughed out loud at her transparent attempt to insert herself into my success. I'll keep that in mind. Later that week, I was reviewing plans for the William in my office at the Monarch when my assistant informed me that Miranda was in the lobby, asking to see me. I hadn't invited her, and she hadn't called ahead. When she was shown in, I noticed immediately that she was dressed in what she clearly considered business attire, complete with portfolio and tablet. "I was in the area for a meeting," she explained, though I hadn't asked. "Thought I'd stop by and see your operation." "What can I help you with, Miranda?" She glanced around my office, taking in the view of Boston Harbor, the elegant furnishings, the awards displayed on a shelf behind my desk. "I've put together some thoughts on potential synergies between your hotels and my company's corporate travel needs," she said, opening her portfolio to reveal a presentation. "We have a corporate sales department that handles those arrangements," I replied. "You're welcome to schedule a meeting with them if your company needs hotel accommodations." Her expression tightened. "I'm trying to help you, Reynaldo. My company spends millions on corporate travel annually, and we'd be happy to accommodate them through the proper channels." Now, was there something else? "I have a conference call in 10 minutes. The dismissal was clear. And for perhaps the first time in our adult lives, Miranda found herself without the upper hand in our dynamic. She closed her portfolio slowly. "I always supported your interest in hotels, you know," she said quietly. "Even when Mom was hardest on you, this revision of history was so blatant I couldn't let it pass. Actually, Miranda, you regularly mocked my career choice. At your wedding, You introduced me to your in-laws as your brother who just checks people into hotels. Your exact words. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I was under a lot of stress that day. You've been under a lot of stress for approximately 30 years then. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken resentments and the shifting power dynamic. I'm sorry, she finally said, the words sounding unpracticed and stiff. I underestimated you. We all did. It wasn't a particularly warm apology, but it was probably the best Miranda was capable of offering. Apology accepted, I replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really do have that call. As she left, I realized that while the family hierarchy had been irrevocably altered, true healing would take more than revelations and apologies. It would require consistent changes in behavior and attitudes that had been entrenched for decades. A week later, I invited my father to tour the Newport property we were acquiring. As we walked through the grand old hotel that would soon join our portfolio, I could see his pride and genuine interest. What will you call this one? He asked as we stood on the terrace, overlooking the Atlantic. I'm thinking the Sea Glass. It has history, but needs updating, kind of like our family. He laughed at that. Speaking of family, your mother is already redecorating the condo. She's invited half her friends to see it next week. Is she telling them her son owns it? Leading with that information, actually, we shared a knowing smile. You know, he said thoughtfully, for years I worried that I hadn't done enough to protect you from their criticism. That maybe I should have spoken up more forcefully. You did what you could, Dad, and you believed in me when it mattered most. He nodded slowly. Still, I wish things had been different. Family shouldn't make you feel small. No, I agreed. They shouldn't. But sometimes the people who diminish you end up teaching you how to grow, in spite of them. Later that month, I arranged a private dinner with just my father. Over steaks at the Monarch's restaurant. He shared his thoughts on retirement and his hopes for the future. Your mother wants to travel, he told me. She's suddenly very interested in seeing Europe. Specifically, the expensive parts. I smiled. If that would make you happy, you should go. What would make me happy is spending more time with you, he said honestly. Learning about your business, maybe even helping out if there's something a non-business type like me could do. The offer touched me deeply. As it happens, the William will need someone to oversee the community relations aspect when it opens. Someone good with people. Respected. Trustworthy. If you're interested, the position is yours. The joy in his eyes told me everything I needed to know about whether I'd made the right choice. As for my mother, her attempts to insert herself into my success continued unabated. She showed up at the Monarch unannounced multiple times, introducing herself to staff as the owner's mother and making suggestions about decor and service. I eventually had to instruct the management team about appropriate boundaries. Miranda took a different approach. After her failed attempt to establish a business connection, she retreated temporarily, then reached out with what seemed like a more genuine attempt at reconciliation. She invited me to dinner at her home, without her husband present. Over wine, she confessed something unexpected. I'm thinking of leaving my job, she told me. I hate it. I've always hated it. Then why stay? I asked. Because it's what everyone expected of me. The golden child has to keep achieving, right? The pressure never stops. For the first time, I saw my sister not as a competitor or antagonist, but as someone trapped in her own version of family expectations. While I had been underestimated, she had been overburdened. What would you do instead? I asked. She hesitated. I've always wanted to open a small bookstore cafe. Something cozy and personal, the opposite of corporate life. But it seems ridiculous to start over at 36. It's never too late to build something that makes you happy. Our conversation that night didn't erase decades of complicated history, but it opened a door to a different kind of sibling relationship, one based on authentic connection rather than competition. 6 months after the revelation at my father's birthday dinner, our family landscape had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. The condominium I purchased for my parents became their primary residence, with their suburban house sold to finance my mother's newfound love of luxury travel. My father split his time between travel with my mother and his community relations role at the William, which was nearing completion. Our weekly father-son lunches became a cherished tradition, a time to discuss business, life, and the ongoing family adjustments. During one such lunch, my father shared an observation. You know what's interesting? Your success forced everyone to see you differently, but it also gave them permission to change themselves. He was right. Miranda had quit her corporate job and was in the process of opening her bookstore cafe in a space I had helped her lease at favorable terms. It wasn't charity, but a strategic investment in both a business I thought could succeed and a relationship worth salvaging. My mother had transformed her social narrative completely. Now she told anyone who would listen about her son, the hotel magnate, claiming she had always encouraged my entrepreneurial spirit. While the revisionist history was sometimes frustrating, I had come to accept it as her way of reconciling the past with the present. I've been thinking about what you said that night, my father continued, about family blindness costing dearly. It goes both ways, doesn't it? They were blind to your potential. But in some ways, we were all blind to what each of us truly needed. His insight struck me as profound. The cost hadn't just been to my pride, or their missing out on celebrating my success. The real cost had been years of authentic connection and support that our family could have provided to each other. Jackson and I continued expanding our hotel portfolio, with the William opening to excellent reviews and strong bookings. I made sure my father received recognition at the grand opening, standing beside me for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The pride in his eyes that day was worth more than any financial success. My relationship with Miranda evolved into something unexpected, a tentative friendship built on our newfound ability to see each other as complex individuals rather than competing siblings. Her bookstore cafe, aptly named New Chapter, became a local favorite. She found a kind of fulfillment in this modest business that had eluded her in corporate success. I never would have had the courage to do this if you hadn't shown me another path was possible, she admitted during the cafe's opening week. Sometimes I wonder what else I missed, because I was so focused on being who everyone expected me to be. It was a vulnerability I had never seen from my sister before, and it opened the door to healing conversations about our childhood and the pressures we had both faced. Albeit in different ways, my mother remained the most resistant to genuine change, still attempting to control narratives and insert herself into my business dealings. I established firm boundaries, which she tested regularly, but eventually came to respect, if not fully accept. During a family dinner, celebrating the first anniversary of the Williams opening, my father raised his glass in a toast that captured our journey. To seeing each other clearly, he said, "Better late than never." Those words resonated deeply. Family blindness had indeed cost us all dearly, but the recognition of that blindness had ultimately led to growth none of us could have anticipated. In the quiet moments, reflecting on the transformation of the past 18 months, I recognized that success had never really been about proving my worth to my family. It had been about discovering my own capabilities and building something meaningful. The revelation at my father's birthday had been satisfying, yes, but the true reward came in the authentic connections that followed. However imperfect they might be, the luxury hotels, the financial success, the professional recognition, all of it paled in comparison to the simple pleasure of having lunch with my father every week and knowing he was proud of me, not because I owned hotels, but because I had stayed true to my vision despite years of discouragement. As our portfolio expanded to include properties across New England and beyond, I often thought about that moment outside the Monarch, when my mother and sister blocked my path, unable to see who I had become. the memory no longer stung as it once had. Instead, it served as a reminder that perceptions can blind us to reality, and that sometimes the greatest success lies in transcending the limitations others place upon us. My father's advice about carrying success with humility became my guiding principle. I expanded our company's charitable initiatives, creating scholarship programs for hospitality students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and establishing a foundation to support small business entrepreneurs. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for our newest property, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "I found something I thought you might want," she said without preamble. "I was going through some old boxes and found that shoebox of hotel soaps and shampoos you collected as a child. The one your father would add to whenever he traveled." The mention of that childhood collection, something she had previously mocked as silly, caught me by surprise. "I kept it all these years," she continued, her voice softer than usual. "I guess part of me always knew those little bottles meant something important to you." It was as close to an acknowledgement of her past dismissal as she could manage, a small olive branch extended across decades of misunderstanding. "I'd like to have it," I told her. "It would make a nice display piece in my office." Perhaps the most profound lesson in all of this was learning that success doesn't erase the past, but it can help shape a different future. The family blindness that once caused such pain had ultimately led to clearer vision for all of us, even if that clarity revealed uncomfortable truths along with new possibilities. As our company expanded into its 10th property, I often reflected on the journey from that first small motel to our current portfolio. Each property represented not just a business achievement, but a personal milestone on the path to self-discovery and family reconciliation. The true cost of family blindness had been years we couldn't reclaim, but the benefit of newfound sight was a future limited only by our willingness to truly see each other, with all our flaws and potential. Has your family ever underestimated your potential or failed to see who you truly are? How did you respond? And what did you learn from the experience? Drop your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this reminder. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to recognize our true capabilities. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right.